All right, guys, this has got me extremely heated. Okay, and I'm gonna tell you guys why. Here's the fuel pump installed. So we got our TXL wire in. I didn't have this gauge in black though, unfortunately, so I had to use orange. But I mean, it's pretty cut and dry, especially with the radium setup. It's easy to kind of tell which one's power and which one's ground. Obviously, you can follow the fuel pump wire down here, and then the fuel level stuff is situated. So we're gonna go ahead and get this reinstalled back into the car now. So we kind of got screwed, kind of. So what ended up happening was, with the radium hanger in, this fitting is an 8, but whoever worked on the car before, I didn't realize that they made a 6 a.m. feed line. So now I've got to order a fitting, the fitting that goes here, to replace it. So we thought about doing the 8 a.m. to 6 a.m. adapter, but the problem is the length of the hose. So this hose is PTFE, and if we put that adapter on, it's going to kind of force the line to bend somewhere down here awkwardly, and we obviously don't want that. But as you can see, the length is actually correct for where it needs to go. So we're just going to order this fitting from Radium. That'll change that out. This guy will go back in, and as you can see, the return line and the vent line is already done. So I'm going to start tackling the wiring. So my plan is just to so this cap goes on it. What I plan to do though is to leave that cap off for now, and I'm just going to wire up the fuel pump quick and dirty to the new fuel pump relay. And what I really want to do is I'm going to try to run the wires from the fuel pump relay through the factory grommet down here. I know it's a little hard to see with the lighting, but there's a grommet right here, and that's where the factory harness goes through. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to tug on this, and you can see that the connector is moving. The problem is that this wire goes above the tank, and so I've just got to figure out how to get that all routed. So what I may end up doing would be, I can either run a bulkhead fitting through here for the wiring, or I can try to run it underneath somehow. So the wires are done here. I ended up opting to repurpose some of the wires from the fuel pump relay. So the fuel pump relay gives you some really long wires, just because that it's designed to think that the battery is in the front of the car. So I was able to chop down the wires, you know, because waste not, want not, right? So I ran new power wires here, and I've made them pretty long. So they're decently long here because, like I said, the goal is to have it to run out through here. So I've made them pretty long. But what I'm gonna do for now is just kind of wire it up really quick here. So this yellow wire is gonna go to the pump itself, and that's what feeds power to the pump. The red wire here, I've got to reattach the fuse to it since I chopped it off of the extremely long red wire, and then reattach the fuse to this wire. Then the second thing is that this is now the trigger wire. So all that wiring comes from this plug right here, and what I'm going to do is I'm just going to figure out how to cleanly mount all this stuff here. So I may mount the fuel pump relay somewhere in this area and then intercept the wiring for the trigger on through here is what I'm thinking, but I'm not quite sure just yet. What I do know is for now I plan to just hook up the pump once we get this fitting, of course, is I just plan to hook up the pump to power and ground really quick just to get the pump running. So we also have to drain the fuel that's in this car. I don't know how old it is now, but it's pretty dang old now, so we're probably going to run all the fuel out of it as well. So all right guys, this has got me extremely heated, okay, and I'm gonna tell you guys why. I spent quite a bit of time going through this connector. This is the fuel pump ECU connector, okay? The problem is that these colors aren't populated correctly, not according to my service manual, but that doesn't even matter, okay? So what we were having issues with is the fuel pump not coming on, okay? And then now that I've been working my way backwards, I've kind of figured out why. So on this connector here, the vampire taps basically just force it to key on, which is why there's not a fuel pump relay. I couldn't find a fuel pump relay anywhere wired in here, but what I did was I found these vampire taps. So the two wires that I've got here that we're gonna be mainly concerned about is going to be this light green wire and this other green stripe. I think it's green red, I don't know what it is, but these two are vampire tap to key on, okay? And I'm gonna tell you why this is bad. Generally speaking, or actually relatively speaking, in all cars that have an ECU, the way the fuel pump comes on is that when you first key it on, it has a timer to prime it, okay? So, you know, you key it on, the pump primes for like 2 or 3 seconds, and then after that, it shuts off. Once you go to crank the car and the ECU sees engine RPM, at that point it activates the fuel pump again, and then it'll start. And when the car stays started and running, the fuel pump will stay running. Now, if you stall the car out, you know, it'll default and then it'll prime the pump again for like, you know, 1 or 2 seconds or whatever you have it set up for, right? So the reason why I sound so pissed off about this is because I am. This fuel pump was wired to key on. So if the car stalled, if you get into a wreck, the fuel pump will never shut off. Could you imagine building a Supra that's trying to make, you know, 5,000-7,000 horsepower or whatever, and you have this junk going on? Imagine if you get into a wreck. You got a passenger in the car, you got your kids in the back, whatever the case may be, you're in the car. If you get into a wreck and you roll over, the fuel pump will not stop. It will just stay running. And that's why I'm so heated. I just can't believe that anybody would let knowingly do this type of work with vampire taps nonetheless, and do this type of work. And I'm pretty sure the reason why there's no power here, like when I went to go key the car on, fuel pump didn't run, I guarantee you that the fuse is bad. I guarantee it. I guarantee it. Just because that, knowing that inside this pump is a 450 style pump on the factory wiring and what I saw in the tank, that's unacceptable. Guys, please, when you're modding cars, please try to do it the best that you can. I'm not gonna lie to you, in the past I've done stupid shit like this, and I don't do it now because it is shit. You know, you don't know what type of implications that this could cause, and rolling over getting into a rollover accident is bad. Like, it is detrimental, obviously, but imagine if the car catches fire and goes ablaze because you did this type of crap. Please don't do this type of shit anymore. Please, 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 please. Anyways, now with that rant over, I'm going to go ahead and just run a fresh wire. I was originally going to tap this on the ECU side of it, but I found out on the harness that he has, the fuel pump wiring is not even populated on the AAM side of it. So I looked at the AAM infinity wire and I found the pin that it's supposed to go to, and surprise, surprise, the wire is not even populated. So I don't know if that's the reason why they jumped this, but even if they did it that way, the AEM has aux wiring. They could have easily ran a fuel pump wire and took the time to run the wire in the back. So forgive me for sounding extremely pissed off, but I am, because of how bad this could have been. So these are really interesting. I got the vampire taps off, but I've never seen one that folds into like a Z shape. So it's pretty, I guess this is pretty interesting. Still not the way you should do it, but you got the wires in here, and then you kind of work this thing to completely shut, and then it makes a nice little Z contraption, which is pretty cool, I guess. I've never seen one of these before. Not that I'll ever use them, but always good to know. And if you look here, with the vampire taps removed, you can see that it ate into the wires. Well, that's not the end of the world. From here, what we're going to do is I'm going to check all the fuses up front. I'm going to struggle to do that. I'm going to hook up the battery and key it on. Fuel pump obviously is not hooked up, so I'm not too concerned about that. And what we're trying to do is we're just trying to isolate and find out where key on power is. So one of these is going to be battery power, and we're going to isolate that, and we're going to try to find key on power now though. So it is extremely humid inside the shop today, but we're back on the Supra. And the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to bypass the clutch switch. Now, the reason why I'm doing it is because, one, I don't think the clutch switch is working. And two, I want to be able to crank the car while not having to press on the clutch. So that way it's just going to make my life a bit easier. So the clutch switch is right over there. And I'm going to attempt to unplug it somehow. I just don't know how to unplug it. So I'm going to attempt to unplug it, and I'm going to jump the wire. So let me give that a shot. I'm going to put this camera down here and figure that out. So it looks like the clutch switch, the connector broke on it, and someone put little spade connectors on it, which is fine. You know, it's not like it's a detrimental part. It's not moving, it just would stop the car from cranking. So I'm going to hook up the battery right quick, and we're going to see if it cranks. And if all goes well, it should crank. Okay, perfect. So, all right, so I did some diagnostics. So only the crank sensor is hooked up, right? But we are getting a trigger signal, and this is actually the reason why we started this whole ordeal to begin with, was that the AEM one day out of the blue just had no crank signal. So I did all my testing and everything tested out good, but AEM wasn't getting any signal. But as you can see here with the max ECU in and barely, you know, with the bare minimum stuff put in, you can see that it's cranking and it has a trigger signal. So So the next thing on this car, now that the cam and crank are wired up, the cam I may have to go back because it's a VR sensor and you can flip the polarity on them. So I may have to go back and troubleshoot that. I'm not doing that just yet though. I need to attack the main relay. And so the biggest problem that we have here with this car is that these relays were wired in, and when you would key them on, the fans would come on and they would stay on. But here's the problem. The problem is that if you disconnected the fans, the ECU wouldn't come on. And it's tapped into this fuse box area here, and I don't know why or the rhyme or reasons behind it, but this is what I'm all working with here. So this is like, got some Testa tape on it, which is the interior Testa tape, and it's got a ton of electric tape and just all sorts of weird stuff here. So, and it's, more importantly, it's also tapped into the fuse box. So the number one thing is we're going to undo all this wiring and try to make odds or ends out of it. But the main thing is that I need to figure out what's going on with this main relay here before I can really move forward, because I have to start wiring up the main relay on the cockpit of the car to have the max ECU turn it on.